Hello, my name is Robert Price. I'm 28 years old. I work as a freelance carpenter, mostly fixing up old houses in the neighborhoods around downtown. I live in a cramped two-bedroom apartment with my roommate, William Jones, who's been my best friend since college. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 months ago, but it feels like yesterday because some moments just burn themselves into your memory. I was standing in our narrow hallway at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, my work boots still caked with sawdust, my tool bag heavy in my hand. The apartment was dark except for the pale glow coming from under William's bedroom door. I'd been working late again, trying to finish a kitchen renovation that was taking longer than expected. My keys were still in my hand when I saw her. Samantha Green was leaning against our front door, arms crossed, wearing an oversized gray sweater and dark jeans. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had that look on her face. You know the one. The look that says she's been waiting, and she's not particularly happy about it. "You're late again," she said, her voice quiet but carrying that edge that made my stomach tighten. "Where were you?" I set my tool bag down carefully, buying myself a few seconds to think. Samantha was William's older sister, 26, and she'd been staying with us for the past month while she figured out her next move after leaving her job at a marketing firm downtown. She was supposed to be temporary, just crashing on our couch until she found her own place. But somewhere in those 4 weeks, something had shifted between us. "Working," I said, which was true but felt inadequate. The Peterson job ran long again. She pushed herself off the door and stepped closer. In the dim light from the hallway fixture, I could see the concern in her dark eyes mixed with something else I couldn't quite name. "Robert, it's almost midnight. You left at 6 this morning." The way she said my name made something twist in my chest. There was care there, real care, and it scared me because I'd been trying so hard not to notice how much I look forward to these late-night conversations in our hallway. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one who's ever found themselves in a situation like this, caught between friendship and something deeper. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how we got here, because the story really started 6 weeks earlier when William first mentioned that his sister needed a place to stay. I was sitting at our kitchen table, which was really just a folding card table we'd bought at a garage sale, eating cereal for dinner and reviewing blueprints for a bathroom renovation. William came home from his shift at the hospital where he worked as a nurse, looking tired but animated in that way he got when he had news. "Hey, so I need to ask you something," he said, dropping his backpack by the door and heading straight for the refrigerator. "My sister Sam is having some trouble with her living situation." I looked up from my blueprints. I'd heard William mention his sister over the years, but I'd never actually met her. She was older, lived across town, worked in some corporate job that sounded impressive but vague. In my mind, she was just another piece of William's family story, like his parents who lived 2 states away or his cousin who was in the military. "What kind of trouble?" I asked. William pulled out a beer and then leaned against the counter. "She quit her job last week, some kind of situation with her boss that she won't really talk about, but it was bad enough that she just walked out. Now she can't make rent on her apartment, and she needs somewhere to crash while she figures things out." I set down my spoon. Our apartment was small, barely big enough for the two of us. The living room was cramped, the couch was old and uncomfortable, and we only had one bathroom. But William was my best friend, and family was family. "How long are we talking?" I asked. "A month, maybe 2 at the most. She's already got some interviews lined up, and she's looking at cheaper places. She just needs time to get back on her feet." I nodded. Yeah, okay, as long as she doesn't mind sleeping on a couch that's older than we are." William grinned. "Thanks, man, I owe you one. She's actually pretty cool, you'll like her." That was a Thursday. Samantha moved in on Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard voices in the hallway outside our apartment. William's laugh and then another voice. Lower, warmer. A woman's voice saying something about how many stairs there were in our building. The door opened and William walked in carrying 2 large suitcases, followed by someone who made me forget what I was doing with the coffee maker. Samantha Green was not what I'd expected. I'd pictured someone more like William, maybe shorter hair, more corporate looking. Instead, she was tall and graceful, with long brown hair that caught the morning light from our kitchen window. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue t-shirt, but she moved with a confidence that made our cramped apartment seem suddenly smaller. "Sam, this is Robert," William said, setting the suitcases down. "Robert, my sister Samantha." She stepped forward and extended her hand. "Thanks for letting me crash here. I promise I'll stay out of your way." When I shook her hand, I noticed her grip was firm, her skin warm. "No problem," I said, and meant it, though I was already wondering how staying out of each other's way would work in an apartment where the kitchen and living room were essentially the same space. "Coffee?" I offered, gesturing toward the pot that was still brewing. "God, yes," she said, and I caught William rolling his eyes. "She's not human before caffeine," he explained. "Fair warning." Samantha punched his arm lightly. "I'm perfectly human, thank you. Just more pleasant after coffee." I poured 3 mugs and handed one to each of them. Samantha wrapped both hands around hers and inhaled deeply before taking a sip. When she did, she closed her eyes for just a second, and I found myself watching the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. "This is good," she said, opening her eyes and looking at me. "Really good." "Thanks, I grind my own beans." "Of course you do," William said. "Robert's one of those people who does everything the hard way because it's better." "The right way," I corrected. "There's a difference." Samantha smiled, and I felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. I like people who care about getting things right. That first day, she was true to her word about staying out of the way. She set up her temporary bedroom on our couch, hanging a sheet from the ceiling to create some privacy. She kept her belongings neatly organized in 2 corners of the living room. When William and I watched television in the evening, she either joined us or disappeared into her makeshift room with a book. But by the second week, the boundaries started to blur. I came home from work one Tuesday to find her in the kitchen, standing at the stove with a wooden spoon in her hand. The apartment smelled incredible, like garlic and herbs and something rich and savory. "I hope you don't mind," she said without turning around. "I wanted to cook dinner as a thank you, but I realized I don't actually know what you like to eat." I set my tool bag down and washed my hands at the sink beside her. She was making some kind of pasta sauce, and it looked professional. "It smells amazing. You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. Besides, I was going crazy with nothing to do all day except send out resumes and wait for callbacks." "Any luck with the job search?" She stirred the sauce and shrugged. "A few interviews, but nothing solid yet. Turns out walking out on your last job without 2 weeks' notice doesn't look great on applications, even when you have good reasons." There was something in her voice, a tightness, that made me want to ask what those good reasons were. But we barely knew each other, and it felt too personal. "What kind of work are you looking for?" I asked instead. "Honestly, I don't know anymore. I spent 3 years in marketing and I was good at it, but I hated every minute. The whole industry just felt so fake, so focused on manipulating people into buying things they don't need." She tasted the sauce and added more pepper. "I keep thinking there has to be something else, something that actually matters." I understood that feeling more than she knew. I'd spent 2 years after college in an office job that paid well but made me miserable. It wasn't until I started working with my hands, building and fixing things, that I felt like I was doing something real. "What did you study in school?" I asked. "English literature with a minor in art history, completely useless in the real world, according to everyone who matters." She turned to look at me, and I saw frustration in her eyes. "What about you? Did you always want to be a carpenter?" "Not exactly. I have a business degree, actually. Worked in an office for a while after graduation, but it wasn't for me. I like making things, fixing things. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again." She nodded slowly. "That sounds nice. Working with your hands, seeing real results." "It is, though the pay isn't always consistent, and some days my back feels like I'm 80 years old." She laughed, and the sound filled our small kitchen in a way that made it feel warmer. "Everything has trade-offs, I guess." William came home just as she was draining the pasta, and the 3 of us ate dinner together at our little card table. It was the first time our apartment had felt like a home rather than just a place where 2 guys happened to sleep. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Samantha would be gone during the day for interviews or meetings with temp agencies. I'd leave for work early and come home to find signs of her presence. A coffee mug in the sink, a book left open on the kitchen counter, the faint scent of her shampoo in the bathroom we all shared. She started cooking dinner a few nights a week, and those became the evenings I look forward to most. We'd sit around our tiny table and she'd tell us about her job interviews, the strange people she'd met, the companies that seemed promising or completely insane. William would share stories from the hospital, the funny things patients said, the small victories and frustrating setbacks. I found myself talking more than I usually did, telling them about the houses I was working on, the families I met, the satisfaction of bringing old buildings back to life. Samantha listened with genuine interest, asking questions about techniques and materials that showed she was really paying attention. One evening in late October, William had to work a double shift, so it was just Samantha and me for dinner. She'd made chicken with some kind of wine sauce that was probably too fancy for our card table, but she served it like it was perfectly normal. "Can I ask you something?" she said as we were finishing the main course. "Sure. Do you ever think about doing something bigger, like starting your own construction company or renovating whole buildings instead of just rooms?" I set down my fork and considered the question. It was something I'd thought about, late at night when I couldn't sleep, but I'd never said it out loud. Sometimes. There's this old building downtown, used to be a hotel in the 1920s. It's been empty for years, just slowly falling apart. Every time I walk past it, I imagine what it could be if someone cared enough to fix it properly. Why don't you? Money, mostly. A project like that would take hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more. Banks don't exactly line up to lend money to freelance carpenters with big dreams. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. But what if you could find investors, people who believed in the project? I wouldn't even know where to start with something like that. "I might," she said quietly. "That's what I did at my old job, essentially, finding ways to connect people with money to projects that needed funding. Obviously not for construction, but the principles are the same." Something in her voice made me look at her more carefully. "Are you thinking about this seriously?" "Maybe. I need to find something to do with my life. And you're talking about something that actually matters. Bringing beautiful old buildings back to life instead of tearing them down for parking lots. That's the kind of work that makes a difference." We talked until almost midnight that night, sketching out ideas on napkins, imagining what that old hotel could become. Apartments maybe, or artist studios, or some combination of both. She had ideas about marketing and financing that I'd never considered. And I found myself getting excited about possibilities I'd never let myself seriously consider. When William came home from his shift, he found us at the kitchen table surrounded by napkins covered in rough drawings and notes. "What's all this?" he asked, looking exhausted. "Robert and I are planning to take over downtown," Samantha said with a grin. "Sounds about right," William said. "Just don't forget to invite me to the ribbon cutting." But as November turned into December, something else was happening alongside our late-night planning sessions. I was becoming aware of Samantha in ways that had nothing to do with business partnerships or shared dreams. I noticed the way she hummed quietly to herself while cooking, always the same song that I couldn't identify, but that got stuck in my head for hours afterward. I noticed that she read mystery novels exclusively, burning through 2 or 3 a week, and that she always figured out who the killer was by chapter 5 but kept reading anyway. I noticed that she was beautiful, but more than that, she was interesting. She had opinions about everything from city planning to the best way to make scrambled eggs, and she wasn't afraid to argue her point even when she was probably wrong. She was funny in a dry, unexpected way that caught me off guard and made me laugh harder than I had in months. And I noticed that I was starting to look forward to coming home in a way that had nothing to do with rest or food or getting out of the cold. The problem was that she was William's sister, and William was my best friend, and there were unspoken rules about these things that I'd never had to navigate before. The problem was also that she was supposed to be temporary, just passing through our lives until she got back on her feet, and I was starting to dread the day she'd announced she'd found a home and an apartment and would be moving out. The problem was that I was falling for someone I couldn't have, in a situation that had no good ending, and I didn't know how to stop it from happening. Things came to a head on a Saturday night in mid-December. William had gone out with some friends from work, and Samantha and I were watching an old movie on our tiny television. She was curled up on one end of the couch, I was on the other, and there was a careful space between us that we both maintained without discussing it. The movie was something from the 1940s, black and white, with sharp dialogue and dramatic lighting. Samantha had picked it, saying she was in the mood for something where people said exactly what they meant instead of dancing around their feelings. Halfway through, during a scene where the two leads were finally admitting they cared about each other, she turned to me and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" My heart started beating faster, but I tried to keep my voice casual. "Depends how personal." "Have you ever been in love, really in love, not just thinking you were?" The question caught me completely off guard. We talked about a lot of things over the past month and a half, but never about relationships, never about feelings that personal. "Once," I said after a moment, "in college. Her name was Jennifer. I thought we'd get married, have kids, the whole thing. She had different plans." "What happened?" "She got into graduate school across the country. I asked her to stay or to let me come with her. She said she needed to focus on her career, that she couldn't handle the distraction of a serious relationship." I shrugged, trying to make it sound like ancient history instead of something that still stung sometimes. Turns out I was more invested than she was. Samantha was quiet for a moment, watching the movie but not really seeing it. "I'm sorry, that must have been awful." "It was for a while, but I learned something from it. You can't make someone want the same things you want, no matter how much you care about them." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm learning that too." Something in her voice made me look at her more carefully. "What about you? Ever been really in love?" "I thought so. His name was David. We dated for 2 years, lived together for the last 6 months of that. He was smart, successful. Everything looked perfect on paper." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "But he never really saw me, you know? He saw the version of me that fit into his life plan. The successful girlfriend with the good job and the right clothes, who would eventually become the successful wife with the nice house and the perfect dinner parties. Is that why you left your job? Something to do with him?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. On the television, the movie characters were dancing in a nightclub, lost in their own world. "He was my boss," she said finally. "Not directly, but high enough up that it mattered. When I tried to break up with him, he made it clear that my job depended on keeping him happy. Not in so many words, but the message was pretty obvious." I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and immediate. "That's illegal. You could have reported him." "To who? His best friend who runs human resources? His golf buddy who's the regional manager?" She shook her head. "I tried to make it work for a few more months, thinking maybe I could outlast him, but it just got worse. So I walked out." "I'm sorry, that's completely unfair." "It is what it is. At least now I know what I don't want." She turned to look at me, and in the flickering light from the television, her eyes looked very serious. "I want to work with someone who respects me. I want to build something that matters. And I want to be with someone who sees me for who I really am, not who they think I should be." The space between us on the couch suddenly felt charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. I knew I should say something safe, something that would keep us in the comfortable territory of friendship and shared dreams about renovating old buildings. Instead, I said, "I see you." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to decide what I meant, whether I was talking about business partnerships or something deeper. "Robert," she said quietly, and there was a warning in her voice. "I know," I said. "I know all the reasons this is complicated, but I needed you to know that I see you, the real you, and I think you're incredible." She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the couch. "This is a bad idea." "Probably. William would kill us both." "Maybe. I'm supposed to be getting my life together, not making it more complicated." "I know." She opened her eyes and looked at me again. "But I see you too, and I've been thinking about what it would be like to kiss you for 3 weeks now." The confession hung in the air between us, honest and dangerous and impossible to take back. "Samantha," I started, but she shook her head. Don't say anything reasonable or responsible. Just for tonight, can we pretend that this isn't complicated? That you're not my brother's best friend, and I'm not the disaster who's sleeping on your couch?" I moved closer to her on the couch, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to smell her shampoo and the faint scent of the perfume she wore sometimes. For tonight, I agreed. When I kissed her, it was soft and careful at first, both of us aware that we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But then she kissed me back, and careful became urgent, became the kind of kiss that makes you forget where you are and why you were trying to be sensible in the first place. We broke apart when we heard William's key in the front door, jumping to opposite ends of the couch like teenagers caught by their parents. William came in talking loudly about something that had happened at the bar, and if he noticed that we were both breathing a little too hard or sitting a little too stiffly, he didn't mention it. But everything had changed, and we both knew it. The next few weeks were a careful dance of stolen moments and meaningful looks and conversations that meant more than their words suggested. When William was home, we were scrupulously normal, talking about job interviews and work projects and what to have for dinner. When he wasn't, we found excuses to be in the same room, to brush hands while reaching for the same coffee mug, to sit closer together on the couch while watching television. We didn't kiss again, but the possibility hung between us like a promise and a threat. Samantha got a job offer in early January, a marketing position with a nonprofit that worked on urban development projects. It was perfect for her, combining her professional skills with work that actually mattered. And the pay was decent enough that she could afford her own apartment. She told us over dinner on a Tuesday night, and William was genuinely excited for her, talking about how great it was that she'd found something she actually wanted to do. I smiled and said all the right things, but inside I felt like something was breaking apart. "When do you start?" I asked. "Monday, and I found an apartment too, just a few blocks from the office. It's tiny, but it's mine." She looked at me when she said it, and I saw the same mixture of excitement and sadness in her eyes that I felt in my chest. "That's fantastic," William said. "We should celebrate. Go out somewhere nice. My treat." "You don't have to do that," Samantha protested. "Of course I do. My sister gets her life back together. That's worth celebrating." We went to a restaurant downtown that Saturday night, the kind of place with cloth napkins and wine lists that required actual thought. William was in a great mood, telling stories and ordering rounds of drinks like we were celebrating a major victory. Samantha looked beautiful in a black dress I'd never seen before, her hair down and curled slightly at the ends. She laughed at William's jokes and asked me about the renovation project I was starting the following week, and to anyone watching, we probably looked like three friends having a good time. But under the table, her foot brushed against mine, and when she handed me the salt, her fingers lingered on mine for just a second longer than necessary. After dinner, we walked back to the apartment through the cold January air. William was a little drunk and walked ahead of us, pointing out things in store windows and talking to himself about something that had happened at work. "So this is it," Samantha said quietly, falling into step beside me. "Looks like it. I move out tomorrow afternoon." "I know." We walked in silence for a block, the space between us feeling like a chasm. "Robert," she said, and then stopped walking. I stopped too, and William kept going, oblivious to the fact that we were no longer behind him. "I need you to know that these past 2 months have been some of the best of my life," she said. "Not just because you and William helped me when I needed it, but because of what we talked about, the dreams we made together, the way you made me feel like I could be more than I thought I was." "Samantha, let me finish. I know this is complicated. I know there are a million reasons why we can't do this. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "How do you feel about me?" She stepped closer, close enough that I could see her breath in the cold air. "Like you're the person I've been looking for without knowing I was looking. Like you see parts of me that I didn't even know existed. Like maybe all the terrible things that happened this year were worth it because they brought me to you." I wanted to kiss her right there on the sidewalk, with William 50 feet ahead of us and cars driving by and the whole world watching. I wanted to tell her that I felt exactly the same way, that the past 2 months had changed something fundamental about what I thought I wanted from life. Instead, I said, "What do we do about it?" "I don't know, but I know I can't pretend it's not happening anymore." William had realized we weren't following him and was walking back toward us, weaving slightly, but focused enough to look concerned. "Everything okay?" he called out. "Fine," Samantha called back. "Just got distracted by something in that window." But when she looked at me, her eyes said something entirely different. The next day, I helped her move her things to her new apartment. It was a studio in an old building that had been converted, with high ceilings and big windows that let in lots of light. It was small but charming, and I could see her making it into something special. William had to work, so it was just the two of us loading her suitcases and boxes into my truck and driving across town. We didn't talk much during the drive, both of us aware that this was an ending of some kind, even if we weren't sure what it was ending. Her building didn't have an elevator, so we carried everything up 3 flights of narrow stairs. By the time we were done, we were both breathing hard and laughing about how much stuff she'd managed to accumulate in 2 months of living out of suitcases. "Thank you," she said, standing in the middle of her empty apartment surrounded by boxes. "For everything, for letting me stay, for listening to my crazy ideas, for being you. Thank you for making our apartment feel like a home for a while." We stood there looking at each other, both of us knowing this was the moment where something had to be decided. We could pretend the past 2 months had been just friendship and good intentions. We could go back to our separate lives and see each other occasionally at family gatherings and holidays, always careful to maintain appropriate distance. Or we could acknowledge what was really happening between us and figure out how to deal with the complications. "I should go," I said, but I didn't move toward the door. "You should," she agreed, but she stepped closer to me instead of farther away. "This is a bad idea. Terrible idea. William will never forgive us." "Probably not. We could ruin everything." "We could." She was close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in her eyes again, could smell her perfume mixed with the scent of cardboard and dust from the move. "But what if we don't?" she whispered. I kissed her then, properly this time, without the fear of being interrupted or the need to pull away. She kissed me back like she'd been waiting for this moment since that night on the couch, like all the careful distance and meaningful looks had been building to this. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we figure it out as we go," she said, "together." That was 6 weeks ago. We've been careful, meeting for coffee or lunch when William is at work, talking on the phone late at night after he's gone to bed. We haven't told him yet, partly because we're still figuring out what this is, and partly because we're both terrified of how he'll react. But the careful distance is getting harder to maintain. The stolen moments aren't enough anymore. We want to be together openly, to build something real instead of hiding in the spaces between other people's schedules. Which brings me back to that Tuesday night, standing in our hallway with sawdust on my boots and Samantha waiting by the door. "Working," I said again, setting my keys down on the small table by the door. The Peterson job ran long again. Samantha stepped closer, and I could see the worry in her eyes more clearly now. "Robert, it's almost midnight. You left at 6 this morning." The truth was that the Peterson job had finished at 8:30. I'd spent the last 3 hours driving around the city, thinking about what I wanted to say to her, how to explain that I couldn't keep doing this dance of pretending we were just friends when William was around. "I know," I said. "I needed some time to think." "About what?" I looked at her standing there in our narrow hallway, beautiful and concerned and real, and I realized I was tired of being careful. I was tired of measuring every word and gesture, tired of pretending that what I felt for her was something small enough to hide. "About us," I said. "About what we're doing and where we're going and how long we can keep pretending this isn't happening." She leaned back against the door, her arms still crossed, but her expression softened. "And what did you decide?" "That I'm in love with you," I said, the words coming out more simply than I'd expected. "Really in love, not just thinking I am, and that I don't want to hide it anymore." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, that I'd pushed too hard too fast and ruined whatever chance we might have had. Then she smiled, and it was like watching the sun come up. "Good," she said, "because I'm in love with you too, and I was starting to think you were going to make me say it first." I laughed, feeling something tight in my chest finally loosen. I thought about it. But I figured if I was going to turn our lives upside down, I should probably be the one to say it. "Our lives are already upside down," she pointed out. "We're just finally admitting it." I stepped closer to her, close enough to touch, close enough to see the way her pulse was beating in the hollow of her throat. "So what do we do now?" "Now we tell William," she said, "together, tomorrow." The thought of that conversation made my stomach clench. But she was right. We couldn't keep this secret anymore. Not if we wanted to build something real. He's going to be furious, I said. Maybe. Or maybe he'll be happy that two people he cares about found each other. She reached out and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. Either way, we'll deal with it together. I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, the reality of her touch. I love you, I said again, because I could, because she was here and she loved me back, and for this moment, that was enough. I love you too, she said, and then she was kissing me, right there in our hallway where William could have walked out of his room at any moment and seen us. But I didn't care anymore. I was done hiding. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. So what were you really doing for those 3 hours after work? Driving around thinking about you, about that old hotel building I showed you last month. What about it? I drove by it tonight, and there was a for sale sign in the window. I wrote down the realtor's number. Her eyes lit up with excitement and possibility. Are you serious? I'm serious about a lot of things lately, I said. About you, about us, about not being afraid to want something bigger than what I thought I could have. She kissed me again, softer this time, and I could taste the future in it, uncertain but bright with possibility. We're really going to do this, aren't we? She said. All of it. The building, the business, us, if you want to. I want to, she said without hesitation. I want all of it. We stood there in our narrow hallway, holding each other and planning our impossible future, and I thought about how strange it was that the best things in life often started with the scariest conversations. Tomorrow we would tell William, and he would either understand or he wouldn't, but we would face that together. Tomorrow we would call the realtor about the hotel building and start the long process of turning dreams into reality. Tomorrow we would begin the complicated work of building a life together, with all the challenges and uncertainties that entailed. But tonight we were just two people who had found each other against all odds, standing in a hallway that suddenly felt like the center of the universe. I should probably get some sleep, I said, though I made no move to let go of her hand. You should, she agreed, not stepping away from me. Big day tomorrow. Very big day. We smiled at each other, both of us knowing that neither of us was going anywhere just yet. Samantha, I said, yeah? Thank you for waiting by the door. Thank you for coming home. And in that moment, I realized that home wasn't our cramped apartment or her studio across town or even the old hotel building we dreamed of renovating. Home was this, the space between us that we'd finally stopped trying to measure and control, the place where we could be completely ourselves without fear or pretense. Home was wherever we were together, building something real out of hope and hard work and the kind of love that makes you brave enough to change your whole life. The hallway light flickered slightly, the way it always did late at night, casting shifting shadows on the walls. But neither of us moved to turn it off. We just stood there holding hands and planning our future, while the rest of the world slept around us. And for the first time in months, I wasn't worried about being late. The next morning came sooner than either of us wanted. I woke up to the sound of my alarm at 6, the same time I always got up for work, but everything felt different. The apartment looked the same, smelled the same, but there was an electricity in the air that hadn't been there before. I could hear William moving around in his room, getting ready for his early shift at the hospital. Soon he'd be in the kitchen making coffee and toast, following the same routine he'd followed every weekday for the past 2 years. But today would be the day we told him everything. I showered and got dressed, trying to rehearse what I would say, how I would explain that I'd fallen in love with his sister and that we wanted to be together. Every version I came up with sounded either too casual or too dramatic, like I was either minimizing something important or making it bigger than it needed to be. The truth was, I had no idea how William would react. He'd never been particularly protective of Samantha, at least not in the obvious ways. He respected her ability to make her own decisions, trusted her judgment about people and situations. But this was different. This was his best friend and his sister, two relationships that had been separate parts of his life suddenly colliding in ways he'd never had to think about. When I came out of my room, William was exactly where I'd expected him to be, standing at the kitchen counter with a piece of toast in one hand and his phone in the other, scrolling through Patreon. Morning, Estonia, he said without looking up. Coffee's fresh. Thanks. I poured myself a mug and tried to think of a way to bring up the subject naturally. Hey, what are you doing tonight after work? Nothing special. Why? Sam and I wanted to talk to you about something. That got his attention. He looked up from his phone, his expression curious but not concerned. Everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. We just need to have a conversation. Sounds mysterious. He finished his toast and grabbed his keys from the counter. Should I be worried? No, I said, which was true and not true at the same time. Just some things we need to discuss. Okay, well, I'll be home around 7. We can talk then. He headed toward the door, then paused and looked back at me. You sure everything's okay? You seem kinda tense. I'm fine, I said, just tired. Long day yesterday. He nodded and left for work, and I was alone in the apartment with my thoughts and my coffee and the growing certainty that the conversation we were planning could change everything between us. I called Samantha while I was driving to my job site, using the hands-free setup in my truck. How are you feeling? She asked as soon as she picked up. Terrified, I admitted. You? The same, but also excited. I'm tired of hiding this, Robert. I want to be able to call you my boyfriend instead of just Robert. The word boyfriend made me smile despite my nervousness. It sounded so normal, so wonderfully ordinary after weeks of careful distance and stolen moments. I want that too, I said. I want to be able to take you to dinner without worrying about who might see us. I want to hold your hand in public. I want William to know that I'm completely crazy about his sister. He'll understand, she said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. He has to understand. And if he doesn't, then we'll figure that out. Together, remember? I pulled into the parking lot of the house I was working on, a Victorian-era place that needed new wiring and updated plumbing. The kind of project that would keep my hands busy all day while my mind spun in circles. I love you, I said. I love you too. And tonight, everyone will know it. I spent the day running electrical wire through walls and trying not to think about the conversation ahead of us. But every time I thought I'd managed to focus completely on work, my phone would buzz with a text from Samantha. Nothing important, just small updates about her day, but each message reminded me that everything was about to change. At 5:30, I called it a day and headed home. William's car wasn't in our building's parking lot yet, which gave me a few minutes to shower and change clothes and maybe figure out what I was going to say. Samantha arrived at 6:45, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a blue dress that made her eyes look even darker than usual. She looked nervous but determined, like someone who'd made up her mind about something difficult and was ready to see it through. You look beautiful, I said, kissing her hello in our hallway. It felt strange to do it so openly, without checking first to make sure William wasn't around. Thank you. I figured if we're doing this, we might as well look good while we're doing it. How was your day? Long. I kept checking the clock every 10 minutes, like that would make it go faster. She set the wine down on our kitchen counter and turned to face me. I've been thinking about what we're going to say. And I think we should just tell the truth, that we fell in love, that we want to be together, and that we hope he can be happy for us. Simple as that? Simple as that. William's key turned in the lock at 7:15, and my heart immediately started beating faster. This was it, the moment we'd been building toward for weeks without really admitting it. Hey, he said, coming through the door and hanging his coat on the hook by the entrance. Sam, I didn't know you were coming over. I brought wine, she said, holding up the bottle. Figured we might need it for this conversation. William looked between us, and I saw the moment when he realized this wasn't going to be a casual chat about work schedules or apartment maintenance. Okay, he said slowly. Should we sit down? We moved to the living room, William taking his usual spot on one end of the couch, Samantha and I sitting together on the other end. The space between us felt charged with everything we were about to say. So, William said, looking at both of us with an expression I couldn't quite read. What's going on? I looked at Samantha, and she nodded slightly. We'd agreed that I would start, since William was my friend first, my roommate, the person who'd trusted me enough to let his sister stay in our apartment. There's something we need to tell you, I began, and then stopped, realizing I still didn't know exactly what words to use. Robert and I have fallen in love, Samantha said, jumping in when I hesitated. We've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but there's no easy way to say it, so we're just saying it. William was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for anger or disappointment or some kind of explosion. Instead, he started laughing. Not mean laughter, not the kind that suggested he thought we were ridiculous. Just genuine amusement, like we'd told him something that was funny rather than shocking. Are you kidding me? He said, still chuckling. That's what this is about? You two think I haven't noticed what's been going on for the past month? Samantha and I looked at each other in surprise. You noticed? I asked. Of course I noticed. You think I'm blind? The way you two look at each other, the way you both suddenly got very interested in staying up late to talk about business plans. He shook his head, still smiling. I was wondering when you were going to get around to admitting it. You're not angry? Samantha asked. Why would I be angry? You're both adults. You're both good people, and you obviously make each other happy. He leaned back on the couch, looking more relaxed than I'd felt in weeks. Honestly, I think it's great. Robert, you've been moping around here for months, and Sam, you've been happier in the past 2 months than I've seen you in years. If you found that with each other, then I'm happy for you. I felt something tight in my chest finally release, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. Really, Ahmad? I said. Really, though I do have one request. Anything, Samantha said quickly. Please don't make out on the couch when I'm trying to watch television. That's just basic roommate courtesy. We all laughed, and the tension that had been building all day finally broke. There is one other thing, William said, his expression becoming more serious. Robert, you're my best friend, and Sam, you're my sister. If this doesn't work out, if you two break up and it gets messy, I'm not choosing sides. You'll both have to figure out how to be adults about it. It's not going to get messy, Samantha said. You don't know that. Nobody knows that when they're starting a relationship. But I need you both to promise me that whatever happens, you won't put me in the middle of it. We promise, I said, and I meant it. Good. William stood up and headed toward the kitchen. Now, who's opening that wine? If we're celebrating, we might as well do it properly. As he rummaged around in the kitchen, looking for a corkscrew, Samantha turned to me with a smile that was pure joy. That went well, she said quietly. Better than well. That was perfect. So what happens now? I took her hand, not caring that William could see us from the kitchen, not caring about anything except the fact that we were finally completely free to be together. Well, now we start planning our future, I said. All of it. The business, the building, us. Together. Together. William came back with 3 glasses of wine and proposed a toast. To new beginnings, he said, and to not having to pretend I don't notice when you two are making googly eyes at each other. We clinked glasses, and I thought about how sometimes the conversations you dread the most turn out to be the ones that set you free. Later that evening, after William had gone to bed and Samantha and I were cleaning up the wine glasses, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. I called the realtor today, she said, about the hotel building. You did? I did. We have an appointment to see it tomorrow afternoon, if you're interested. I set down the glass I was drying and looked at her. Are you serious? Completely serious. I've been thinking about what you said, about taking something broken and making it work again. I want to do that, Robert, with the building, with my career, with everything. With us? We're not broken, she said, stepping closer to me. We're just beginning. I kissed her then, right there in our kitchen with the lights on, and no need to worry about who might see us. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against hers and thought about all the ways my life had changed in the past 24 hours. So tomorrow we look at the building, I said. Tomorrow we look at the building. And then we figure out how to make it ours. I thought about that old hotel, sitting empty downtown, waiting for someone to see its potential and bring it back to life. I thought about Samantha, brilliant and determined and ready to build something meaningful. I thought about the future we were planning together, uncertain but full of possibility. I love you, I said. I love you too, she replied, and I can't wait to see what we build together. Outside, the city was settling into its nighttime rhythm, but inside our small apartment, everything was just beginning.